podcast is brought to you by Greenman, all-natural, mineral-rich superfood. If you have never heard of Greenman, I consider it to be the most important essential supplement for dogs and people. It is a great source of plant-based minerals which are much more bioavailable and effective than supplements made from chemicals or ground-up rock. Minerals cannot be made in our body and have to come in the form of food. Unfortunately, intensive agriculture and food transportation have interrupted the natural nutrient cycle, and soils and food are becoming increasingly depleted. Mineral deficiencies are one of the primary causes of disease. Let me give you another explanation. Most people understand that plants in the garden would not grow if some of the minerals were depleted or missing. For example, if phosphorus is deficient, strawberries and tomatoes would not blossom and fruit. Ironically, healthcare has not fully addressed the fact that food deficiencies are a greatly predisposing factor when it comes to cell and organ dysfunction and disease. Malnourished and depleted plants in the garden are relatively easy to spot, but a mineral deficient body is harder to detect until it's too late. The key to supplementing minerals is to provide them in the most digestible and bioavailable form. This is why I chose algacalcaria for Greenman. This certified organic algae originates from Brazil and has evolved to absorb minerals from the ocean water and deposit them in the roots to anchor itself on the ocean floor. Algacalcaria was first discovered by Brazilian farmers who fed it to horses, cows, and other farm animals and witnessed an amazing transformation. The animals were stronger, grew better, and rarely fell ill, which makes sense because there are 37,000 billion chemical reactions taking place in the body every second, and they cannot proceed smoothly without necessary minerals. Since then, algacalcaria has been used in treatment of osteoporosis in people, and I made it part of Greenman in 2012, the essential plant-based mineral and amino acid supplement for dogs and people in 2021. If you would like to learn and read more what other people say, it is simple. All you need to do is to go to greenmin.com, or for human supplement, Greenman H+, HPLUS.com. Hello, my dog lovers. This is Dr. Peter Dobias, and you're listening to Not Just About Dogs. Today, I would like to talk about a topic that many people are discussing and asking about, and that is a question. What is the correct ratio of calcium and phosphorus for dogs and puppies? And how do we figure out whether we're feeding our dogs the right amounts? Before I start, I'd like to give you a little bit of an idea of what I am planning to do today. First, I'll be talking about puppies after weaning, and then adult dogs, and then I will answer the question about whether we can ensure the correct ratio of calcium and phosphorus in your dog's food. Now, the next part, I'll be talking about how to balance raw diet for certain breeds and if there is any difference for small and large dogs and medium-sized dogs. The other question that people often ask if there's any difference between diet for puppies and adults, and also if supplements are necessary and why good food is no longer enough. Now, the last little part, I'll be talking about if there is any healthy kibble for dogs and how to prepare healthy natural food. In the 30 years working as a vet, I've learned that repetition is at the core of achieving good health of our dogs. I sometimes go out and talk to dog lovers undercover on my walks, not telling them that I'm a vet. And it's kind of fun because that way they're more open to share their experiences with their dogs and also veterinarians. And I can see more clearly what I need to write about and what I need to do. You may have not thought about it, but most veterinarians, myself included, don't really know what it is like to go to a veterinary clinic as a client, as a customer, because we are veterinarians. We don't need usually other veterinarians unless we need a specialist. And I do sometimes wish that I was a fly on the wall and heard my colleagues talking and see how they approach medicine and nutrition. There are two areas that concern me the most, and based on my undercover discussions in the park, dog lovers often talk about nutrition and vaccination. Now, if you have not listened to my podcast on immunity and vaccination, you can look it up in my podcast series. It is there, and it'll give you an idea how to keep your dog and puppies safe without excessive vaccination. So the big question that many of you have is, what is the correct ratio of calcium and phosphorus for dogs? It is actually surprising how hard it is to come across clearly stated calcium-phosphorus ratio recommendations supported by research. Based on the Merck Veterinary Manual, the Association of American Feed Control Officials, so-called AFCO, considers the following levels of calcium and phosphorus acceptable. For puppies after weaning, it would be very wide range of 2 to 18 grams of calcium per 1,000 calories, with the recommended amount about 3 grams. So they give us a range of 2 to 18 grams per 1,000 calories, which means that the minimum is 9 times lower than the maximum, which is kind of wild. They do recommend, though, that the ideal or optimal amount should be 3 grams. And when it comes to phosphorus, it's 2.5 grams of phosphorus per 1,000 calories. Now, I'm going to go with the numbers for a little longer. Adult dogs should be getting about minimum of 0.5 grams of calcium per 1,000 calories, with the recommended amount about 1 gram. And when it comes to phosphorus, it's 0.75. So it's 1 to 0.75 calcium to phosphorus ratio. Now, the Merck Veterinary Manual also states that the amount of nutrients may be modified up and down by 30%, which makes all these figures really vague. Like, how can I actually decide what to feed my puppy when the ranges are from 2 to 18, and then it still varies on top of that 30% up and down? And to make this even more confusing for well-intended dog lovers and pet food manufacturers, not every food digests the same. There is a difference between digesting meat and cellulose, which is quite common in kibble, which is basically ground up wood chips. But even if dog food contains the recommended amounts and ratios of calcium and phosphorus, dry food is much more calorie dense, which results in overfeeding, and puppies eat more volume or more calories per volume than they would if they ate regular food that dogs and canines eat in nature. And this calorie dense diet is actually the primary cause of bone growth deformities and joint growth issues like hip dysplasia or elbow dysplasia in dogs that grow fast. Naturally, all of this makes the decision about what kibble to choose very difficult for well-meaning and caring dog lovers, because there are so many variables, and dogs are also individuals. They have individual requirements for food, and they need to be considered. I have seen so many people experience a great deal of anxiety and worry, and I understand why. We veterinarians, along with pet food companies, have made dog nutrition extremely complicated, and the recommendations are practically impossible to apply in real life. Now, I know that some of you have kids, and I wonder whether you worry and obsess about the food for your children as much as the food for your dogs. I think that it's much clearer what is healthy, good nutrition for humans than dogs. Now, I'm not sure whether making dog feeding complicated is intentional or not, but I do know that it results in everlasting confusion, endless debates, and most of all, unnecessary suffering of puppies and other dogs. And it's really hard for me to see, because I see young dogs that have elbow dysplasia or hip dysplasia, and they cannot enjoy their puppyhood. They cannot enjoy their early stages of life, and they suffer in pain and discomfort quite often for lifetime. And this is a serious problem, and we need to address it. No matter how much people disagree with some of the things that I will say, I will keep saying things over and over until people get it, because it is not complicated. And after 25 years of following certain protocol, I've been able to figure out how not to trigger the genes that may possibly predispose dogs and puppies to bone growth issues and joint issues. For many decades, the education of veterinarians in the field of nutrition has been done under the influence of processed pet food companies and manufacturers who are in the business of selling kibble. For example, the Global Nutrition Committee that has been active at such events as World Small Animal Veterinary Association conferences educates veterinarians in the field of small animal nutrition. The problem is that this committee is also sponsored by 3 large processed pet food manufacturers, which makes it less credible in providing unbiased information. And I think that this is a big problem. We veterinarians should not be educated by those who do make processed pet food, because obviously they're in business of making money. Now, the question remains, can we ensure the correct ratio of calcium to phosphorus in our dog food, in your dog's food? For most dog lovers, it would be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to verify that their dog's kibble contains the right ratio of calcium and phosphorus in connection with the metabolizable energy that is available in the dog food. As I said, there is a difference between calories and energy and minerals and calcium and phosphorus from bones and meat and cellulose. As I mentioned before, cellulose, our wood chips, and other forms of fiber are not digestible. They're used to bulk up the food volume. And you can see that in a dog park when you see poop of a dog on kibble. Their poop is about 3 times as big as those who eat natural, raw, or cooked diet. The difference is so striking that I would bet my pants on recognizing a kibble-fed dog's poop and raw-fed dog's poop. So what this all means practically, we cannot really determine 100% what the true ratio of calcium and phosphorus is in your dog's food. It may look good on the paper, but depending on the ingredients, it may be low, it can be high, and you as a dog lover and dog guardian will have a really hard time to determine whether the ratios are correct. Now, what does this all mean? I've had an opportunity to see thousands of dogs in my practice, and most dogs that have growth-related issues I have seen, including hip dysplasia, cartilage growth disorders, and growing pains, are on kibble. Dogs on kibble appear to grow faster, they're lankier and weaker, very similar to trees. If you over-fertilize a tree, they grow big but weak. Dogs on kibble can consume more calories before they're satiated, and the bioavailability of nutrients fluctuates heavily based on the ingredients. In other words, I would say that puppies that are on kibble are kind of over-fertilized too, if we see it from the point of a gardener. But nature has the answer. Since I began feeding and recommending raw food in the late 90s, I've rarely seen dogs on raw food having any hip dysplasia, cartilage problems, or growing pains. It just does not exist. Even though the genetic disposition may be there, the genes would have to be triggered by the inappropriate diet. It's called epigenetics. Some time ago, I decided that I will not worry what other people think of me. I just have to be there for my patients and for my clients and make sure that they will be given the right information, even though 9 out of 10 veterinarians may still recommend kibble. I don't know any human doctors who would say that processed food is better for our kids and ourselves over healthy, natural food. And the same applies to dogs. I am 100% certain that dogs fed proper, well-formulated raw or cooked diets that include meat, raw bones, vegetables, along with natural vitamins and other supplements for dogs grow slower and they grow stronger. Now, you don't want your puppy to grow too fast because, as I said, they grow weak and they're more likely to suffer from problems. Preventing hip dysplasia and joint and bone deformities is actually really easy when we follow the nature's recipe. I'm really confident that feeding such diet is far superior to kibble, and it dramatically reduces the growth abnormalities and bone and joint disease in puppies, but also in older dogs. I've been asked many times by pet food manufacturers, raw pet food manufacturers, if I would endorse their food, or some clients and customers ask me what food is better and what they should feed. And I do my best to stay unbiased and do not actually participate in any endorsements of raw food, because I want to be an unbiased, independent voice when it comes to feeding and diet, because I think that that's the best for you and also for your dog. So now, when I've gone through the basics of why I don't recommend kibble, I'd like to mention how to balance raw diet, and especially how to balance raw diet for certain breeds and if there is any difference. And the simple answer is no. Even in nature, there's about 36 different species of the Canidae family, and they would include wolves and coyotes and dogs and foxes and jackals and dingoes and raccoon dogs and fennecs. And they have the same dentition, the same digestive tract, and they eat the same food. The way biologists determine what animals should eat, and that includes dogs and humans, they look at their teeth. So canines generally have very sharp incisors to scissor and rip pieces of meat off the bone. And then they have the canines, which are the teeth that grasp the prey and also rip the skin and muscles. Now, the premolars, which are the teeth behind the canine, behind the large teeth, are very scissor-like sharp teeth, and they're designed to shear off the muscles and also crunch the bones, especially the large carnasal teeth, the large premolars. And then there are a few molars, just because dogs also eat some plant materials, and molars are usually much more common in herbivores. So generally, the dentition of a dog suggests that dogs should eat meat and bones with some amount of herbs, plants, and fruit. So now, when we acknowledge the fact that nature doesn't make a difference between the different species of canines, the next question is if there is a difference between raw diet for puppies or any diet for puppies and adult dogs. In nature, as soon as puppies start accepting solid food, they start eating the same type of food as adults. And this continues all the way into old age. I don't know any dogs in nature, any canines or wolves, that would be eating different foods when they're young, adult, or senior. Now, the life stage and breed-based processed food idea is, in my opinion, an invention of pet food companies who needed to create the impression that feeding our dogs is very complicated and that we should not attempt to do it ourselves. While no human doctors are saying, hey, you have to feed your kids processed food because it's too complicated and you will not be able to do that. But we all know that humans are perfectly capable of feeding their children wholesome diet, and there is no difference in dogs. Most problems arise only if dogs are fed kibble, which is unnaturally calorie dense, and it is made of ingredients that dogs would not eat on their own, such as grain, corn, rice, cellulose, just to name a few. But there's another problem, that even if the dehydrated food is made of the same species-appropriate ingredients, it still sits on the shelf for 6 months, sometimes years, sometimes even more or longer. Now, the second problem is that the processed food often lacks 4 essential nutrients: minerals, vitamins, probiotics, and omega fatty acids. Many people tell me that they will feed raw food, but supplements are not necessary. And I believe the same thing in the early days. Believe it or not, I actually fed kibble to my first pets. My cat Mina, who actually lived until the age of 21, got kibble the first 5 years or 7 years of her life, and then she became hyperthyroid, and I switched her on raw food and I started using homeopathy, and she actually lived without any hyperthyroid medication until she was 22, just on raw food and homeopathy. It was quite the shocking discovery. Now, then the next phase was when I got Sky. I fed him raw food, but I did not give him any supplements until about the age of 7 years. And he was okay, but when I started giving him supplements when he was 7, and when I introduced my formulas, I saw a huge difference, the same difference that some people see in their dogs. Now, Pax is lucky because I've had 25 years of experience of feeding raw and natural food. And he's been getting also supplements since he was about 8 weeks old. And he's a totally different ballgame. He's a strong, sturdy, happy puppy. And I'm so grateful that I've been given the opportunity to see the difference between raw diet and kibble, and that I have had 25 years of observing my patients and also my own pets, how they're doing. I've pretty much dedicated the past 15 years to development and formulation of natural diet recipes and also essential supplements. I wasn't really happy what I've seen on the market, and I could see that some people and companies have used human approach to nutrition in dogs when it comes to probiotics and when it comes to some vitamins. They were made of chemicals such as coal and crude oil. And that made me realize that the veterinary industry and the animal supplement production is actually very behind the human nutrition. So that's how we started implementing fermentation processes. We choose the best quality ingredients when it comes to the supplements. Many of our products are certified organic, and some of you may think that I'm crazy that I go into that length and that maybe the products are too expensive. But personally, I think that our pets, our animal friends, are as important as humans. And we know how important they've been, especially during the 2019 to 21, when we didn't get as much opportunity to see other humans and interact socially in a normal way. Our dogs basically rescued us, and they deserve the best. Nevertheless, I would not recommend essential supplements if it didn't make sense. Seeing the difference between dogs on kibble and raw-fed dogs without supplements and dogs with raw food and supplements is one thing, but there also has to be some sort of logic to all this. For the past 100 years, intensive agriculture has caused severe soil depletion, which reflects in depleted plants and meat. Now, if we grow crops on one field for 100 years without really supplementing all the nutrients back in the soil, it must be depleted. And this is what happens when the produce or the crop is harvested. It's distributed in different parts of the world. And the compost, at the best, ends up either in the field in the destination, or at the worst, it ends up in the landfill, but it almost never gets back to the field unless the produce ends up in some sort of local supermarket, and then people recycle and compost all the produce and also put the manure back on the fields. So as time progresses, this causes severe soil depletion, and this depletion does transfer to food and then onto us and our animals. Nature never intended for this to happen. If you go to Africa and see the African animals in the savannah, it works still perfectly because the animals graze grass, and then the carnivores eat the herbivores, and then eventually they all go back to the ground and the cycle completes. When you transport food from California to somewhere in Canada, it never gets back to the Californian fields. And the farmers do not have the resources and the money to supplement all the different nutrients. Plus, the soil is gradually stripped of the microbiome, and the food is just not the same. And I think this is one of the biggest reasons why we see so much difference when we introduce simple mineral support such as Greenmin. Now, Greenmin was my first product that I formulated from the supplement lineup, and I love it. I take it myself. We are actually introducing a human line in 2021 because so many of our dog lovers and customers started taking Greenmin themselves because they see the difference, and they just don't want to miss out on getting all the nutrients. Now, there's 37,000 billion chemical reactions happening in the body every second. And these reactions cannot happen without having all the building blocks, and the body cannot make any minerals on its own. So it's logical that it has to come from food or supplements. And if it doesn't come from food, the only choice we have is supplements. Now, when it comes to green min, I use 2 core ingredients. One of them is algacalcaria, which is a mineral-rich algae. The algae actually anchors itself at the bottom of the ocean to make sure that it wouldn't float away. And it deposits minerals, and it basically creates this paperweight in a way to make itself heavy and anchor itself at the bottom of the ocean. The farmers in Brazil started feeding this algae to the animals, farm animals like cows and horses, and they started seeing them growing stronger and being healthier, which improved the bottom line. Later on, algacalcaria started being used in people for osteoporosis, and we are the first company that used algacalcaria for production of whole food-based mineral support for dogs. Now, the second ingredient that I've added to green min is spirulina. And spirulina is so-called astronaut food. It's actually complete diet, it's complete nutrition, and it has full spectrum of amino acids. And amino acids are essential. The body cannot make all of them on its own, and therefore I added spirulina. Now, spirulina is also green superfood, which helps the body to cleanse and balance digestion, and it has an important role in preventing disease, chronic inflammation, and it is the key component for ensuring healthy function of organs and cells in the body. I have people often asking me if there is any healthy kibble for dogs because they're busy and feeding kibble is so convenient. And people also believe that it is actually cheaper. But when you add the veterinary bills plus the cost of food and the cost of cellulose and wood chips and other fillers, it is actually not any cheaper. Personally, when I go to a dog park, I recognize raw-fed dogs from kibble-fed dogs, especially when they reach 5-6 years of age. They no longer can run on youth, and you can start seeing the difference in their energy level, mobility, and even body weight and how they feel when you pet them. I know that for some of you, you may not be ready, and I don't hold it against you. It requires time, patience, and also a little bit of courage, because there are so many people who will try to discourage you from feeding raw food. If what I just said makes sense to you and you feel ready, I can say with confidence that your dog will live healthier and longer life on average, and your vet visits will be less frequent. As I said, I do not know any human doctors who would recommend processed food instead of wholesome natural food, and I hope that one day the same will be true in veterinary medicine. I know that it will be hard. Sometimes you run into a veterinarian who is not open to raw diet feeding or even cooked diet feeding. I understand, because we've been educated and brainwashed for more than 5 or 7 decades. And it will take some time for this to be undone. Now, if you run into my colleagues who will make you feel guilty or make you feel like you're not a caring dog lover if you say that you're feeding raw diet or you're thinking about feeding raw or cooked diet, just tell them that you're grateful for their opinion, but you're going to do what you feel is the best. And I recommend that you talk to other dog lovers and see what their experiences are, and go online to see that raw, natural diet and cooked diet is becoming more and more popular. It just doesn't fit in the business model of processed pet food companies, and that's the biggest problem. The same situation happened in the automobile industry. When Tesla came up, everyone was negative, and the conventional car manufacturers were trying to discredit it. And now it's a company that is the most valuable of them all. And it sells 3 times as many cars in North America as, for example, Mercedes or other German brands. I believe that there is karma, and if we do act based on our conviction and what we think is right, we can sometimes make mistakes, but in the long run, I think that it'll always guide us to the right answer and to the right solution. Now, if you are ready to prepare healthy natural food, I recommend a few things here. One, you can go to recipemaker.peterdobias.com. I'll spell that. Recipe maker, that's easy, .peter, and the last name is DOBIAS.com. Again, recipemaker.peterdobias.com, and it will give you a whole bunch of information about how to feed diet, how much, what ingredients to use, which ones are not safe for dogs, and how to recognize whether your dog needs more or less food. Now, it's really easy, really simple, and there's also a 15-minute video course on making raw diet. If you have any questions, you can always contact us through our website at peterdobias.com. And if you would like to get more information about Greenmin, the 5-star rated mineral-rich superfood, you can go to greenmin.com. It's greenmin.com. I also would like to thank those of you who have been trusting my work and my products, because it allows us to help other dog lovers if they have any questions or inquiries about their dog's health. It allows us to do research in the field of health and longevity of dogs, and continue working on how to create healthy and longer life for your animal friend. If you have not subscribed to our newsletter, you can always do so at peterdobias.com. I send weekly newsletters with information on how to keep your dog healthy. And if you trust me enough to share my information with others, I'd be very grateful. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, and give your dog a hug for me. Take care.